So I'm going to change it to speaker view. Okay, so welcome everyone who's tuning into this virtual reception to celebrate the artists that are showing in Fermentation. This is our annual EA exhibition, and I'm Heather Lorenz. I serve as the Visual Arts Manager at the Northfield Arts Guild, so welcome to everyone joining in. I first want to start by thanking the Minnesota State Arts Board for their generous support of the Northfield Arts Guild each year. And thank you to Rebound Enterprises for sponsoring our entire season of gallery exhibitions, and to St. Olaf College and to Carleton College for supporting this show, Fermentation. And finally, thank you to all of our members, donors, and sponsors. Your support makes it possible for us to continue making great art happen here in our community, so thank you. So how is this virtual reception going to go tonight? First, I'm going to go through a few overall exhibition photos. Then each of the participating artists will share more about their work and their process alongside a slideshow of their work, followed by a question and answer session. So as you're listening to the artists, please feel free to, as people have already started, put some comments in the chat box or put your questions in the chat box as those artists are presenting. We will come back to all of those questions during the Q&A part at the end after all of the artists have presented. And feel free to send any personal messages to the artists because they will see them during this event. So that'll be really fun to hear from all of you that are tuning in. Thanks so much. So I'm going to go through some overall exhibition photos. So this show, Fermentation, features the Carleton Educational Associates and the St. Olaf Fifth Year Emerging Artists. For those of you who might not be familiar with these wonderful programs, each of the art departments at the colleges invite a select group of students who have graduated to be a part of a fifth-year art apprenticeship / educational associate program. This year of intensive studio experience / art department assistance is intended to better prepare them for a graduate school or a professional career in the arts. Each year, the Guild is proud to host a joint exhibition of these up-and-coming artists. The artists spend a year creating a body of work, and when it comes time to install the show, it's always a surprise to see how each artist's work will hang together and play off of each other in the space. As you will experience in concept, many of the works in this exhibition celebrate the journey of the creation process and embracing the exploration that this year provides. Especially when the works are in process, unexpected things can and will happen, and the progress comes from leaning into this process. And now we will be going to hear from the artists that we're celebrating tonight. We're so thankful to these artists for being here and sharing their talents with us. And we're looking forward to hearing more from each of them. And we are going to start with Eddie Bryson V. If you want to get yourself ready here and unmute. Eddie Bryson is a St. Olaf fifth year who creates large-scale abstract paintings. And please join me in welcoming Eddie Bryson V.
Hello, thank you all for being here tonight. What I like to start off with saying is something that's in my artist statement. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, very heavy music-inspired city, home to the blues, Elvis, multiple Grammy-winning songwriters and rappers. So this form of music being storytelling has been surrounding me my whole life. And so that is kind of where I grounded this style in. So I'm happy to share this development of this style with you all today. So I Think of You is a piece inspired by a rap song by Rod Wave and Kevin Gates called Titanic. Another common theme with my works is romance. So this piece and the song is about romance and frustration and capturing the energy of those type of moments and those feelings. Can you go on to the next slide? So part of the process when it comes to songwriting for me and also my art is, yeah, there's a lot of reiteration. So I included this detailed shot so that I can share with you all how things are built up in layers and how I leave a lot of preliminary marks because I want you all to see that and understand the chaos of the writing process and the painting process. Next. So as you see, that theme is kind of continued here in the dip, and the dip is a reference to dancing. When you're slow dancing and your partner dips you, and there's this like moment of passion in the music. In the movies, this is usually where you'll see like the passionate kiss. And so however you feel about that moment of dance is where I want you to go back to that memory, and I want you to feel like people understand the same feelings that you went through in that moment. And the music that you might have heard in that first slow dance or that first kiss on the dance floor. Next. So these last two pieces refer to returning back to my roots, as far as this is a reference to the first painting I made of this style, where I kept things simple. There's this black line in the middle that kind of represents this emotion I have, and there's this strong outline, and it's very rhythmic, and it kind of reflects the movements that I feel when I listen to a song. Next. And the last piece, Imperfect/Straight Puzzled, is a reference to two of the first songs I recorded. Again, they're about romance and kind of embracing these like imperfect moments in romance and these imperfect moments within myself, and how they can be confusing at times, but there's a boldness and brightness to the way we feel about those memories when we look back on them, and the nostalgia that they bring us when we write them down, or for my sake, painting them in this large abstract form. Yeah, I'm very happy I got a chance to share this with you, and that is my work.
Thank you so much, Eddie. It's so fun to hear the inspiration behind the works and to hear the stories of what you were thinking when you were painting these. So if you have any questions for Eddie, please feel free to put them in the chat box and we will get to them during the Q&A portion at the end. So thanks so much. Gonna go to the next slide if it'll let me. There we go, great. Yeah, and Thomas Hardy is the St. Noble fifth year who explores environmental and political themes in his paintings. Please welcome Thomas to share more.
Hey everyone, thanks for being here. Thank you, Heather. Thank you, Eddie. I think you spoke really well about your pieces. That was great. Yeah, like Heather said, I'm exploring a lot of environmental and political themes in these. I just love to draw, and so I do a lot of representational drawing in these this series here, but so much of it is about our relationship with the land and our relationship with history, like history being lived out in the present, and I think that's just like a concept, an idea that's caught my attention a lot this past year. And that I've just like been paying more and more attention to. So this one's called Bryson, and it's like in a way like a portrait of Northfield, Minnesota. You can see kind of a little map of Northfield above the bison there, and then the river snakes down and comes into the foreground. And I'm trying to show like some of the beauty of what goes on, and also some of the ugliness, some of the pervasive influences of the Anthropocene. You can see the trash. You can see that the bison is a skull. It's an animal that's historically found in this area, but not any longer. And so this piece was just like thinking a lot about how my experience of this place is really tied up in the history of this place and the history of our relationship with the land and our relationship with indigenous communities and the various species that we live here with. Heather, you can go to the next slide. Thanks. And this one, monoculture. So I've been grew up in the Midwest, seen a lot of cornfields, a lot of like endless cornfields, and I think a lot about how bizarre that feature of the landscape is, that there's this these corduroy pants fields of rows and rows and rows of corn, and like the way we approach it is you kill everything you can but the one species and try to like synthesize and inject everything that you think it needs, and so you end up with these like totally sterile enormous fields where corn is one of like the only species growing there, which is bizarre and unhealthy and sinister and all sorts of things. So this one, that's like part of what I was thinking about with this. And then as I thought about the concept of monoculture, it just like became obvious to me that like the way we approach agriculture in a lot of cases is really similar to the way we approach the rest of life. So there's this erasure of complexity, and what amounts to like a single culture expanding like all over the globe. And this is part of settler colonialism. This is part of capitalism, and I think that the way human societies are organized, like the problematic aspects about that are really reflected and expressed in our agriculture as well. Next slide. This one's along a similar theme. It's more about the commodification of bodies in general, like bodies and beings. And so I mean, it's a diagram. It's showing, it's sort of like a comical, ironic diagram of all these inputs and outputs. But this is like, in this case, it's a cow and a corn plant, but it might as well be like an Amazon worker, right? The way that we commodify bodies and think of things in terms of their utility rather than in terms of like their inherent beauty and goodness and right to be. So it's I mean, it's kind of a comical piece with a dark twist, and sort of an experiment. I don't often work this way, where it's like all these, I don't know, or at least it felt new to me, new and exciting, and it was a fun experiment, and that's what it was trying to express. Next slide. All right, this one, my dad really liked this one, which sort of surprised me, but that made me happy. It's called Defenders of the Truth, Defenders of the Status Quo, however you want to think about that, like capital T, that the dominant narrative, the things that I don't like in a lot of cases the oppressor is made to believe and tries to make others believe. So I don't know if you can really read this that well, but there's all these little meaningless phrases that these people are saying. Whereas in essence, one can clearly observe at the end of the day, it's just that the kind of thing that it's like this empty language that is often used to disguise the truth, but that has great authority. So with this piece, I was thinking a lot about the role of language in oppression. There's this poet, and I wish I could remember their name, but Layli Long Soldier, I think. Yes, I believe that's right, but I'm sorry, I should have looked it up beforehand. Who has this book called Whereas, a book of poetry that was, the starting point was this like acknowledgement that was drafted during the Obama administration about the oppression of indigenous peoples in this country. And the author was thinking about just like how empty and inadequate that was, and that word whereas, which started a lot of the phrases, and yeah, so that was a reading parts of that book was a jumping off point for this piece. Next slide. All right, and then this gets into this one's called Bacchus, Minnesota, and it's about line 3. It's about this pipeline that's being built right now by a Canadian company called Enbridge, which is going to carry tar sands oil from Alberta, Canada, to like Duluth, Superior, And there is a section of the pipe that still needs to be completed that runs through Minnesota. And there's people fighting this right now because it's terrible in all sorts of ways. It's bad for the land. It's like another nail in the coffin of global warming. It's like goes against Native American treaty rights in that area. So there's they have the Ojibwe people, the Anishinaabe people have the right to harvest wild rice, and leaks from this pipeline are a danger to that. And the construction of the pipeline has increased rates of like human trafficking and drug trafficking in the area. So there's all these terrible things wrapped up in the pipeline. And it's, I think to me, what I was trying to get at with this piece was the way that abstractions, thinking in abstractions, can be really dangerous. And so there's this field of pipes, these enormous pipe yards, and I was thinking about how you can see that as just like a series of dots. It becomes this abstraction, this thing that's not really real. And when we allow ourselves to live in a way that's not really engaging with reality, that's a dangerous thing. If we think in terms of profit and money and jobs, and while those things are like really common things that are like cited as important, it's like they often leave out other important things like the health of human communities and the land. And yes, next slide. All right, this is the last one, and I'll make it brief. It's called Struction, which is, I don't know. I don't know if I love that title, but the idea was like construction, destruction, obstruction, like getting in the way of construction and destruction. And I love this this little raccoon figure. I've been just drawing a lot of raccoons this year, and I love this little guy as a symbol of a little like trickster, like a little mischief happening. You know, like maybe a grassroots effort to get in the way of some of this destruction. Yes, thank you all for listening. On to the next person.
Thank you so much, Thomas. It was fascinating to hear all the different layers that are underneath all of the pieces that you've done. As you come into the gallery, you look at them, but hearing everything underneath it is just really powerful. So thanks for sharing. And I'm going to put a little plug in. Thomas has a piece coming up in our upcoming show. I know I'm Homeland, so I'm going to tell everybody to come see that as well. So thanks so much, Thomas. We are moving on to Jyn Kim, who is a Carleton Educational Associate who is focused on printmaking this past year. So please welcome Jyn to tell us more about her work.
Right. Hello. Let's see. So this is a woodcut relief print that I've been working last year, and it's a carving of a cilice, which is a chain that is used in a Catholic Christian context as a bit of a self-penance tool. But that's just a brief background. The print itself is just a 3-panel of woodcut, and it's printed on a kozo paper that has been waxed. So I've installed this previously in a room that has a large window, so that when the light shines in, the wax paper has a bit of a translucent quality, and it looks different from a white gallery wall setting. But yeah. Anyways, the 3-panel print, I've started collaging prints since last summer in this manner when I didn't have access to Print Studio for a longest time. And during the time, I've just kind of been thinking or feeling conflicted about scales of print and the editioning nature of printmaking. So the first, the editioning nature was basically like, I guess I had to start coming up with answers as to why I had to make multiple copies of an image and how that changes the image became my exploration of the work later on. But also regarding the size of the size of the print, like I didn't feel too comfortable about all the push towards making a larger print or image that's happening in like the contemporary art world. And I didn't know how to approach it. Like the size of the scale of the work can be rather confrontational. And in parallel to that, I was also thinking a lot about how the content of the work can also be used in that regard, like how we easily use like violent images as a shock factor, and how like not just in art, but also in media, and how that kind of like changes how we perceive violence perhaps. Yeah, so next slide. Yeah, so I've been trying to replicate the silice chains while thinking about like repetitive usage or exploitation of violent images, and thinking about how that could perhaps interact with additioning or repetitive nature of printmaking. And I tried to reduce the image of the chain to simple linear lines, but at the same time, emphasized on the woodcut quality by carving out the grains of the wood itself. Yeah. So next slide, please. And in company with the print, I also made some sculptures, wire sculptures that's made of river tie wires. And that itself was also a really repetitive process as I was thinking through like repetition of not just an image now, but like a concept of pattern or yeah, shock factors. Yeah. And next image, please. Yeah, and similar to the print that includes the small wood cut that follows the wood grain, I also tried to disrupt the repetitive process in between the sculpture by adding linen wire, not linen wire, linen threads. You can kind of see at the bottom left corner, there's linen threads. Thank you, Heather. Yeah, linen threads wrapped around the wires that kind of blend into the white pedestal, but disrupts the pattern of the silice chains. And by having this sculptural chain that is an image on the print, I'm also interested in seeing how a three-dimensional object interacts with a two-dimensional image of the object. And that's where my works are headed to these days.
Thank you so much. I've been waiting to hear more about these pieces that I've been looking at for weeks. And so thank you. I would encourage you to come in if you're in town to take some time and look at this piece and the installation quality of it. And it's beautiful. So thank you. We are going to be hearing next from Junie Min. Let me go get the slide going. And Junie Min is a Carleton Educational Associate who has spent this past year exploring performing and time-based art. So please welcome Junie to tell us more.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Heather, for the introduction. I think I would just jump straight in. Heather, if you could go to the next slide. I would just talk about one work, Changing Winds, which is in the gallery right now. It's a video piece. It's a video collage of like different iterations of one single idea, I guess. So the work, I guess I should talk about the conception of it, is that the work is made out of just complete like spontaneity on my part. I think I looked out of the I looked out of the window and I saw just this huge snowstorm brewing just 4 months ago, last December. And I just thought to myself that is terrifying. And the second thought in my head was, why don't I do something about it too? I can maybe work with it too. And so came the crazy idea that I should paint a canvas. And Heather, if you could go to the next slide. So I just took black acrylic, laddered an old canvas. The canvas didn't really matter. It just had to be something big to go against the crazy winds outside. Heather, the next slide. And I just covered it entirely with black acrylic paint. And one more slide, please. And when I was done, I begged Jyn to help me videograph some of it. during that snowstorm. And so after that, I went out into the snowstorm. Head to the next slide. Yeah. So I carried this canvas, which was still wet with black acrylic, and walked against the winds, against the snow. And on the next slide, you can see that the snow is sort of like coalescing with the black acrylic, creating this composite painting in a way. And on the next slide, you can see that I'm just holding on to it, trying to resist the winds. I started it with just walking, and Heather, on the next slide, we can see that I'm just walking in this landscape. This is situated in Carrollton, and it's just walking. And after a while, say like 20 minutes, I was getting tired and I started just standing. Yes, this is a good slide. So I was just standing and resisting against the winds, and in a way like collaborating with the winds, right? And on the next slide, you can see sometimes it's pretty strong, and I almost slip a lot of times. And on the next slide, you will see that I fell in the end, right? I think this was like 50 something minutes into the walking, the standing, and the holding, the resisting, the collaborating, and just got tired. I think my body, just the energy just waned, and I was getting less careful about where I was putting my foot, and I just slipped, and the winds just knocked me over, right? And on the next slide, you can the canvas actually blew all the way back into the background, and I tried to pick it up, but was just pushed aside by the wind, right? So it was a very strong, stormy day. And after that, I told myself that maybe it's time to be done with this. So I went in, and on the next slide, I started to hang the work up, right? I put a level up, put a hammer some nails in, next slide, and started hanging it. And one more. And this at this point of time, you can see that there's still a little bit frosted, right? The snow was still on there. It's still pretty cold. And on the next slide, I think you will start seeing that over time, right? The painting itself is changing. It's sped up a little, but so you can see the transformation of it. But it's like glistening under the light and changing over time. And that's also part of the reason why it's called changing winds in a way. Not just that I was trying to follow the changing winds, right? The painting itself was also changing because of the interaction I had with the weather, with nature. And I think lastly, what was most striking for me was how my role as an artist and changed over time, right? At first, I was sort of like this person who had the idea. I tried to execute it. Then I became more of a collaborator with the weather, and that became, as I fell down and as my energy waned, became also it fell into like I wasn't exactly like collaborating. I was just being pushed aside, right, by the wind and points of time. And in the end, I was just a person who was hanging the work. I was a sort of just a gallery assistant. And I just thought that for me, that was quite interesting how my own role, even though it was such a simple process, changed over time. And that's why I titled it Changing Winds. Yeah, but that's all I have to share with you. But thank you, Heather, for making this happen. Thank you, everyone, for coming here and listening to me talk. And also thank you to all the Carleton folks and the Carleton faculty that has helped me get to where I am now. It has been a journey. This 5th year has been a really wonderful journey. So thank you for the opportunity. And also thank you, Jyn, for helping me film that crazy video. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, watching that video, especially on the 80-degree days that we've had, thinking back to, that wasn't that long ago. And I think everybody that is in a cold climate can relate to what you experienced filming that. So yeah, thank you so much. And I think if people wanted to have the video or see it too, is there an opportunity for that?
I can drop some links of this Vimeo channel. It's sort of like YouTube, but it's just another. And these are very long.
Perfect.
Oh,
Thank
thank
you. Yes. All right. Paddy Mctag Mcnaught is a Salem of fifth year exploring mixed media, sculptures, and installation. So please join me in welcoming Paddy.
Hey everyone. This first series that I put up, I guess looking at this exhibition and my work in it, I think a lot about modularity and process. And in modularity, I think of parts to a whole, and in process, I think I'm balancing some sort of rigid structure and planning with chance and randomness. So in this series here, I was really inspired by Hokusai's 36 Views of Mount Fuji, which to me was a modular series where every print was contributing to some sort of whole. And so here I tried to do something similar, thinking about some time I spent in Montana, where I made these prints. And so I found that structure of 36 views to be really inspiring. So each print is unique in its own right, yet contributes to a whole. And what I tried to do was make these prints have an arrangement that was designed, which you see in this photo here, but also to embrace some sort of disorder through scrambling them, which Heather, if you can switch, you can see the series of scrambling where I started with the top row, scrambling within the top row, and then slowly making my way down. And then in the last photo you see there is a scramble of all the prints everywhere. Heather, could you switch again? Thank you. Here's a close-up of one that's pretty graphically busy. And then go ahead. Here's one that's quite graphically calm. And I think they were really important compositionally together to balance each other out. Go ahead, Heather. So the next piece I showed was, I called it Connection. And here's a picture from the process of making it. I was burning the backs of the pieces with an oxyacetylene torch. Thank you, John Sauer. Special thanks to John Sauer for hosting me burning these pieces. Heather, go ahead and switch. Here's that piece. It's about, I think it's about 8 by 8, or maybe even more than that in the wall it takes up. It's what I really wanted to do here was focus on the process. So I milled down these pieces of poplar to be 2 inches wide and an inch thick, or I'm sorry, an 1/8 inch thick and about 3.5 feet long. And then I soaked them for about 8 days and then bent them pretty randomly around a gridded cube sculpture structure. And what I really wanted to do here was create a structure that embraced that chance through not only making it, but also installing it. I didn't plan out any of these pieces going in any certain place. They all just happened to fall into place during our installation. So embracing chance and also creating a structure that engages viewers in the present with shadows and texture, with the burnt backs. It has this really awesome glittery finish to it, which is really great, contrasting the nice grain of the poplar on the other side. So that's what I was thinking about with this piece here. Heather, you can go ahead and switch. And also this piece here, Connection to a similar process, milling wood and then bending it in a press. This is actually laminated cedar, where I milled down the cedar to be an 1/8 inch thick and then stacked 3 on top of each other in a press and glued them all together in an arc form. I offset the middle piece in that 3/8 inch stack. So there was a tongue and groove. Basically, one piece could pop into the next piece. And so they became modular in that essence. Go ahead, Heather, thank you. And this was the last piece I have. I finished it kind of days before the installation. It's a birdhouse that is designed for chickadees. And I chose chickadees because I was researching birdhouses and I was really into the ideal proportions for chickadees were all golden ratio proportions. And so I wanted to, and I also want to study, or I want to get into architecture and design. And in the past have used these proportions to design things. And so seeing that was really inspiring to me, that they live in these golden proportions that are all around us. So I designed this chickadee birdhouse. It's really simple, it's poplar, and I burnt it and then splined the corners with white oak, which gives that really great contrast of light and dark again. And it really makes some killer shadows the way it was hung, I think. And it really made sense in the show. It was kind of one of the last things that went up when we were all installing. And it just fit well with everybody's work. And I think there was great continuity in this show. And I'm really happy with the way everybody's work played into each other's. And I guess that's really all I got to say. And thank you, Heather, for organizing all this. Thank you to John. This has been all possible because of you, and Wendell and Beth Arneson, and everybody that funds that 5th year program. We're all very thankful for you guys. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Paddy. And yeah, what you were speaking to about when the artists come in, and it's just so fun to see the relationships of the different shapes that speak to each other through the multiple artworks, even though they're completely unrelated. When they come in this space, there's the conversation that happens. And so embracing that chance and seeing the shapes. And I love how you had a plan, but then you also let this element of surprise come into it too, and spontaneity, which we have heard from other artists too. So I just think it's so great to hear more about that. And many of you are putting in questions in the Q&A and also in the chat box. I'd encourage you to keep doing that as we go. I'm going to go on to the next slide here. So Alex Thoms is a St. Olaf multimedia artist exploring sustainability and magic. So please welcome Alex to share more with us.
Hi. So yeah, I've been doing many different things, and I've just been finding myself exploring and experimenting. And last semester, I was experimenting with making my own paint out of the land and just things around me. And that went into this next project that I started doing, where I was painting my own tarot cards, only using the paints that I had made. And you see the Wheel of Fortune card there is one that I made. And so the next pieces that I'll be showing you, you can stay on this slide for a second, but it was born from this same project. I was thinking at first, I was like, I was thinking that the watercolor pieces would just be thumbnails for like really large scale paintings. And so one of the paintings in this show was that first painting, and I realized I didn't vibe with the scale and stuff like that, so I decided to kind of repurpose it. But it is based on the Death Tarot card, which the Rider-Waite, which is like the original tarot deck, is over here, and this is the illustration that I based some of the motifs off of, and you'll see it come up. So I'm just going to point out, this is my cat, sorry. So we have Death riding a white horse in black armor, carrying a flag with a white rose. The white rose represents this innocence and this purity, and the black dress or the black armor is in invincibility and mystery. And you can see in the back there's tiny little red dot in the water is a boat. And the death card is actually not a scary card. It represents beginnings and ends, and if you get the card and if you're like doing a tarot reading, it could just mean that you're entering a new phase in your life. And so that's kind of where I went with it. You can go to the next slide. And so this is my mom and her sister, and the picture I based it off, you can see there, and I did a drawing and I was like, yes, I definitely want this to be my death card. And so I put it on this big, like, it was like 2 by 3 foot canvas or something like that. And I originally painted it in black and white, as you see there, but as you'll see in the other ones, I decided to redo it and do it in color. And I'm showing you guys all this because there was so much process in it. A lot of my art is very process driven. There's a lot in the process that doesn't really show up in the product that I just love to share with you guys. And so we can go to the next one. And so this is the piece. The piece on the left in black is called Death and Ending. And on the right, we have Death, a Beginning. And so if you look at the pieces, you'll see that a beginning, the painting is stitched onto that canvas. So I cut that piece out of the canvas on the left, and in the space, in the void, I wove with black yarn to fill that absence and fill that void with this sort of meditative version of myself, kind of. It's like I wove myself into their absence. And then I connected them both. And you can go to the next slide. You can just see a nice little close up there. Well, my cat hopefully doesn't go on the keyboard. And yeah, the weaving itself, I mean, it took days and days and days. It is not something that takes a short amount of time. And it's actually based on the process of darning, which, if you guys are not aware of that, it's a mending process that I was actually also using to mend this sweatshirt that my mom had. She went to St. Olaf as well 25 years ago, and her sweatshirt was just absolutely ruined. And so I spent months darning every hole. And so I wanted to bring that process into this larger piece as well. You can go to the next one. Yeah, and so you can see here we have Death's black armor is the black dress that Janelle is wearing. That's my mom's little sister. So she's on the right. And on her dress, she has Death's 5-petaled white rose, the color of innocence, basically. And then on my mom, who is looking fondly down at Janelle, who's leading her, she is wearing a dress that has some of the boats on it, which, you know, is the representation of the journey itself, the moving from one point in time to another, from one era to another, from that ending to that beginning, which, yeah. And I mean, obviously from the content of it, they're both dead. So I don't know if that was clear in the way I was describing them, but yeah, so Janelle is leading her into this afterlife, into this new beginning, which I thought that was such a powerful image. And I didn't even have to change it that much from the original reference. And you can move on to the next one. And so opposite that, I had these other 2 diptychs, and it's funny because in the process, I had no idea what I wanted to match the energy of that original diptych. And what I landed on was, what I mean, not to brag, but I think is a super awesome image of first the flower and this ship in a bottle, but it's against what I tried to illustrate as wallpaper, because there is this notion of grief and this notion of nostalgia and preserving people we love that is, we keep them, you know what I mean? Like we keep them in an altar, sort of, like we keep them around, we keep them close. And so I wanted to sort of illustrate that, bringing the beauty of death and of love and of grief back to the walls, basically. Yeah, so this is just two paintings that kind of riff off of that idea and the motifs from the Death Tarot card itself. And we can go to the next one. Yeah, I wanted to illustrate it as like the very literal interpretation of the white rose, sort of dried in a shadow box and just hung up on the wall. And I did the same with if you go to the next slide, the ship in a bottle, which is just a very literal interpretation of death's boat that is, something we can hold and look at and keep. So yeah, we can go to the next one as well. Yeah, so that was it. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It's such a powerful exploration into, yeah, what Christy said, a very personal journey. And so thank you for sharing that. And I think it's really important for people to hear the process that goes behind. You don't just always come up with a concept and then it's immediately boom, all the different layers and the steps that it went through for you to get it to what we're seeing in the gallery. It's really important to hear that story. So thank you. And we are now at the time for the question and answer. And I know that we've got, I'm gonna show on the screen everybody here, and we'll get ready to answer some questions. And please feel free to put some questions in the Q&A box, and I'm gonna try to get this up so I can read them. And there we go. So we've got one for Eddie here. It says, Eddie, are there any musical artists that are your favorite to use as an inspiration for your work?
Yes, actually. My favorite artist right now is Kevin Gates. He's a rapper from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So he's who inspired me to start writing my own songs and start being a rapper myself. So usually that's who I go to when I'm starting off looking for inspiration. But there's also Rod Wave, who is someone that Kevin Gates mentors. And it's kind of interesting. I bring up this kind of like mentor relationship because, like I said, for my last two pieces, they were inspired by two of my first two songs. So I guess I would include myself as one of my favorite people to listen to as far as like favorite artists for inspirations. You can word it that way. And then my mentor as far as personal to me would be my brother. His name, if you want to look him up, is King Reese. That's the REE5E, King Reese. And then my work would be under Quell the Artist. So if you want to go check us out, you can do that. But yeah, so him, me, Kevin Gates, and Rod Wave would be some of my favorite musical artists.
Great, thank you. And I think that answers that next question. Yes, do you like to listen to music when you paint? I think that's a definite yes.
Yes, yeah.
Great, thank you.
Often, I was going to include with that, often like with the dip and I think of you, I will start to dance as I paint and use that to kind of put an extra element into the work.
Great, awesome. So we've got a question here for Thomas. Are you able to see your complete drawing in your mind before you start?
That's a really good question. I do a lot of planning sketches before I go and do the finished work, usually to like small low input prototypes to figure out the composition, figure out the colors, figure out the shape of everything. But I've been talking some with Wendell Arneson recently. By the way, thank you so much, Wendell, for being part of what makes this fifth year program happen. And Wendell talks a lot about how like why make work if you know what it's going to look like before you start. And I think that's really wise. And yeah, so like some works that I do, I really have a vision for it, and I try to just like chase after that and make it happen. But more and more I'm trying to let like leave some room for chance and leave some room for my subconscious to be part of the expression, because I think that's, I don't know, I think that's really important. Also collage is useful. I think there are all sorts of ways that you can like harness that subconscious and like ferment right, what you're thinking about. And collage is one of those. Keeping a sketchbook is one of those. Journaling or writing poetry, all like everything, like the cross-pollination between different forms of expression, I think is really important for getting richer ideas into your work, whatever your work is. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. And I think Eddie did speak to the ties between his own music and visual art, but in case you wanted to do any more follow-up, we had that question as well.
I guess I could elaborate a little bit more on it. So my process starting last fall, really, actually, if I can like turn this around, you can see more paintings that where I started with for my senior studies. It starts with me writing. Well, that process started with me writing a song, and then I would take metaphors or objects from those songs, and that's how I would start the abstraction process, and that's how I would start to sketch them out the same way I would write out the first couple of lines or like a chorus or so, or a hook for a song. So yeah, so that's the process, how the process relates to the painting process, and the content is obviously derived from that.
Awesome, thank you. Next question here for Alex. With such a dedicated and at times lengthy process to your work, what does it feel like once you've finished a piece?
That is a good question, Sonia. And it may surprise you guys that I hated these pieces until I put them on the wall and tied that string between them. I was like, I've put in weeks of work and it is underwhelming. But the second I put that last connection, I was like, oh, okay, you guys are all welcome for getting to look at that. So it's funny that it is not really like always that feeling of like, yes, I did that. And then sometimes it just takes like that one extra thing and you're like, oh, okay, I made art. So sometimes it's very like hot and cold. And well, with the flower piece, that one instantly I was like, I love the direction this is going in and it's really capturing what I'm trying to say. So it really varies, especially depending on what I'm trying to say and like what my medium is and like how connected I am to it. And I had tiny little sketch. It was like this big of what I wanted this final thing to look like, that I just scribbled, like it just came to me and I'm like, ah, and it just tiny crappy little scribble. And like everything that I had been making, I was comparing back to this tiny little doodle. And I was like, I can't wait to see this done. And yeah, so sometimes it is awesome. And then sometimes you're like, that's not art, but it is. So yeah, that's my answer.
Awesome, thanks so much. And I think most of what, oh here, so anyone talk about the process of positioning your pieces in the physical gallery spaces. Any challenges or surprising, finding the placement? Yeah, maybe speak to what it was like to try to hang a show before you even saw the gallery and had to envision it, and what that process was like. Thomas, I don't know if you're talking or Jyn too, because I know you had you were very much wanting that particular wall, and was that because you were envisioning how it was going to go? So
Well, yeah, for me, I wasn't planning to put my sculpture like laying down flat to the ground initially. Like I wasn't even going to include the sculpture actually because it's just a handful to transport over to the gallery all the way from storage. But yeah, well, I guess it's just hard to really envision it unless I actually bring the work to the space. So being able to bring it over before installing it helped a lot. Like the sculpture, I wouldn't even have thought about putting it down unless I just like threw it on the ground after carrying it, and they just looked great like that. That's why I decided to put it on a pedestal after that. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. And Junie too, because you had a plan for putting up one of your pieces in a different window, and that transformed too. I don't know if you want to say anything about.
Oh yeah, it transformed. Well, I was basically putting you can sort of just think of it as a mirror. I was basically putting a mirror that is also see-through in a way. It's also see-through, so you can see both yourself and stuff behind the screen. I wanted to place it at the gallery front entrance at the start, but because of space limitations, it wasn't best to put it there. Then we put it at the emergency exit. Not sure if that's the best decision, but it made me think about it after I was done installing it there, that it is interesting that this like view to the outside has now become like such an such a urgent thing now. And I thought that there was some interesting implications about what it means to see nature through this digital lens.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Anybody else want to talk about actual putting up of your work?
Well, I'll say that one thing I was a little surprised by and like was it really interesting to try to work with it is the wall that you see right there. That is a different color than the wall that was behind us. So we were trying to figure out which diptych should go where, and it was kind of working with the color of the wall and how much I wanted it to blend in or how much contrast I wanted it there to be, like how much I wanted you to be like struck by seeing it on the first glance. And that was interesting. That wasn't something that I had anticipated to think about at all.
And all right, and Eddie, we've got how are your pieces significant to you?
Well, I make all my pieces very personal because I kind of follow this rule of the artwork matters to the viewer because it matters to you kind of thing. So they're all either about like a special memory or a special person. So I'll often like associate like a particular girl like a piece or like a particular first time doing something with a piece. These weren't so much tied down as my previous work, the ones that I just showed you. Like, I'm gonna do it again. I'm gonna just start. This is easier. So like when I do work like these were about different losses. Like this was about the loss of my maternal grandfather. So they can get really personal, and sometimes sometimes there are tears that are required in order to finish the process. But that's why I think it matters to people when they see my work, and that's why it brings out the best in me. So yeah.
Thank you. And I'm going to combine several that, what's next essentially is the question. What will you do after this academic year? What's next for all of you? So if we can each just go around and hear what's coming up, what your plans are. So let's, I'll just start with Thomas. I'm just gonna go around the way that you show up on my screen. So.
Sure. Yeah, good question. An important but sometimes difficult question for all of us, I'm sure. I think I want to start first, like what's next like art-wise in a more immediate sense. I've been working on this piece that like toes the line between abstraction and representation. So I think a lot of the pieces I have here are really representational, and that's something I enjoy doing. But I love abstract work too, and that's part of why I love this show. Is there's a great balance between like representative pieces and abstract pieces. So I think like for me personally, like more trying to meld those two worlds is really exciting. And then like as far as after this year professionally, I'm trying to do illustration. So basically like art that accompanies words, and that could mean like posters or flyers or political cartoons or illustrations for magazines or books or any of that. But I I'm afraid about the lonely life of the artist working alone in their studio, and I think that illustration would be a good good way to make that into a more collaborative venture. And yeah, so I'm really excited to try to make that work. And yeah, next person.
Thank you. Yeah, Jyn, what's next?
Project-wise, I'm working on another collage piece in intaglio printmaking, which is just about exploring style and perspective. And immediately I'll be returning home after the academic year, because I just haven't been home for like more than a year and a half now. So like I'm pretty at my breaking point of returning home and homesickness. But anyways, after that, I'll probably be resuming my studies, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you for sharing. Oh, Patty, you just took a drink, but you're up.
Hey, my plans, I have some tentative plans to help with some design of a structure or house in the Azores of Portugal over the summer. And after that, I would love to get into design and architecture and pursue that at some point. But first, I think I'd like to work with my hands a little bit more and find maybe a wood shop or some sort of making job, furniture maker position somewhere, perhaps New York, where I can do that. And then maybe wait till this COVID stuff blows over, and then it's such a collaborative experience that I don't want to miss out on that collaboration and those connections that could be made in person and in real life.
Thank you. Alex.
Hi. Well, my very presently current next project, I pulled out a little, is I'm illustrating a children's book that I wrote with reclaimed fabric. So it's, you know, old scraps that I've hoarded for 6 years that everyone told me I would never use, but here I am. And you know, old t-shirts that, you know, it's like, who is going to go to the thrift store and be like, yes, that 2006 Little League shirt, finally. So you can, you know, finally get that and reclaim it from the landfills and end up making that. And yeah, so I'm currently illustrating a children's book about consent. So it's called Can I Hug You? And that's what I'm doing. And beyond that, I could not tell you. I couldn't tell you.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you. Eddie.
So in the immediate future, going to continue to smile, but also finish these 2 paintings. And after school year or semester, I'll be heading down to Rochester, Minnesota to work with Junie Min as a studio assistant. And my goals for the far future are to eventually head to grad school so I can become a professor of art, like many of the great professors I've had here. So, yeah.
Awesome. Oh, you're gonna have so much fun with Judy. Yay. Junie.
Yeah, for me, I'm just going to try to do more collaborative work while I am in Carleton. So think I'm gonna try to work with 2 dancers and a musician in Carleton, and they're all seniors, so they're done with like their senior thesis, and they're hopefully more free. And I just want to work with them and see what we can come up with. And yeah, that's next. And after that, let's just plain old rest during the summer.
Nice. Awesome. Oh, thank you so much to all of you for sharing your talents and your time and sharing these stories with us tonight. This was such a treat to be a part of this. And let's just give them all a virtual round of applause, like over, yay. Yes, definitely. So congratulations. We have recorded this reception, so if you know anybody who would like, that wasn't able to attend it live or would like to watch this again, it will be up on the Guild's YouTube page soon. And this show is in person for 2 more days. So please, if you're around and you can come on down, I would invite you to come see it. The Guild building is open Wednesday through Friday from noon to 5 and Saturdays from 11 to 4. And this is the final week of the show. Many of the works in the exhibition are for sale, and all the purchases will support both the artist and the Guild. You can find all these details at the Guild's website, northfieldartsguild.org. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. And I'll get to my thank you screen. And just thank you, artists. Thank you for attending. This was such a lovely evening. So congrats. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Heather.